Type matchups are one of the most important factors in competitive Pokemon. Having a good defensive typing can make the difference between being OU viable or getting completely destroyed. But sometimes a Pokemon's typing is so bad that it should be unusable. Yet they still dominate in competitive play either ways. In this video, I'm going to be going over Pokemon that are objectively terrible with their typings, and they still somehow became OU or Uber staples, despite their massive weaknesses. We gotta start off with Tyranitar because this Pokemon has legitimately one of the worst defensive typings in the entire game, yet it's still viable and has been viable in OU since every generation it was introduced. Tyranitar is a rock and dark type, which gives it 7 weaknesses: fighting, bug, fairy, grass, ground, steel, and water. But here's the really brutal part: it has a 4 times weakness to fighting, which is one of the most common attacking types in competitive Pokemon. On paper, Tyranitar should be completely unusable. Any team with a fighting type should instantly counter it, and with 7 total weaknesses, it should be getting hit super effectively in basically every match. So why is Tyranitar still OU after all these years? Tyranitar's ability Sandstream automatically summons a Sandstream when it enters battles. And in Sandstorm Rock type, Pokemon get a 50% boost to their special defense. This means Tyranitar's base 100 special defense effectively becomes 150 in Sandstorm, which makes it an absolute special tank. Combine that with 100 HP, 110 defense, 134 attack, and 95 special attack, and you have a Pokemon that can function as a mix attacker, a physical tank, and a special tank, and a support. Like, it has a ton of different roles. Some of the most common sets that we see nowadays are the Stealth Rock setter, the bulky Tyranitar with Assault Vest, which further raises its special defense, and it makes it nearly impossible to OHKO with special attacks. The only generation Tyranitar has not been OU viable is the current generation, which is Gen 9, and this is primarily just because of power creep, and every other generation from Gen 2 through 8 it has been OU viable. Without such a good ability and godlike stats, Tyranitar would be unusable. But because it has both, it completely overcomes one of the worst defensive typings in the game and remains a competitive staple. Weavile might have the single worst defensive typing of any OU Pokemon in history. Dark and Ice gives Weavile 6 weaknesses to fighting, bug, rock, steel, and fire, and fairy. But here's the really brutal part: Weavile also has a 4 times weakness to fighting. Fighting is literally the most common coverage type in competitive Pokemon, as I've mentioned before with T-Tar, and it hits normal, ice, rock, dark, steel, and type super effectively. So every team almost always has a fighting coverage, whether it's close combat, focus blast, mach punch, super punch. All of those moves also instantly OHKO Weavile. Weavile also takes 25% damage from Stealth Rock because of its ice typing, which means it loses a quarter of its HP from just switching in. And with only 70 HP, 65 defense, and 85 special defense, Weavile is one of the most frail Pokemon in OU. Though that does also mean like losing the 70 or the 25% doesn't make as much of a difference, but like it still is a noticeable difference. Like, let's be real, Weavile's bulk is absolutely terrible. 70 HP and 65 defense means that even neutral physical hits can do massive damage, and pretty much any special attack can OHKO or 2KO it. Weavile is so frail that it can't take a hit from basically anything, and with 6 weaknesses, including a 4 times weakness to fighting, it should be completely unusable. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I kinda roasted Weavile a little too much there, but anyways, the answer is 125 base speed, 120 base attack, and one of the best defensive move pools in the entire game. Weavile is the fastest relevant ice type in most generations, and ice coverage is absolutely crucial for dealing with dragon, flying, and ground types. Weavile's most important move is Ice Shard, which is a priority ice move with 40 base power and stab, and Weavile's 120 attack makes Ice Shard hit really hard. It's enough to revenge kill most dragon Pokemon, especially like Garchomp, Salamence, and Dragonite. The other thing that makes Weavile really good is the fact that it also gets stab on its dark type moves like Knock Off, Pursuit, and Beat Up. And Knock Off is obviously one of the best utility moves in the game because it removes the opponent's item permanently, which can totally cripple defensive Pokemon that rely on leftovers or Eviolite. Pursuit is also insane because it traps Pokemon that try and switch out and deals double damage if they do try and switch out. This makes Weavile one of the best Pursuit trappers in OU, though that is kind of a niche strategy, and it can trap and kill Psychic and Ghost types that would normally escape. Weavile's speed also lets it function as a revenge killer, as it outspeeds most of the OU metagame naturally, and it can 2KO or OHKO threats before they can even move. The key to using Weavile effectively is to never let it actually take damage, so you want to use it as like a revenge killer. Without Weavile's speed and Ice Shard priority, many teams would struggle to deal with dragon type sweepers. So yeah, another thing I feel like I forgot to mention is the fact that Ice Shard being a priority type move, you can deal with dragon type setup Pokemon, like let's say Gale Shot Garchomp got like a massive speed buff. I can come in with Ice Shard and have that priority, so even if it has like an insane speed buff going on, I can still stop it before it ends up sweeping my entire team. The next Pokemon we're talking about is Shaymin-Sky, which is another example of a Pokemon with an absolutely terrible defensive typing, and it still dominates OU when it was Sleeko, and now it's in the Uber tiers. Shaymin has a 4 times weakness to ice, which is already devastating since the ice type coverage is extremely common. Ice Beam, Ice Shard, which is a priority move, Icicle Crash, all of these moves instantly OHKO Shaymin-Sky. And basically every competitive team has at least one Pokemon with the ice type coverage, specifically for dragons and ground types, so Shaymin kinda just gets hit in the crossfire of all of that. But it gets worse because Shaymin-Sky also has a regular 2 times weakness to fire, flying, poison, and rock, with 1 being a quad weakness, and rock type moves are especially problematic because Shaymin-Sky takes 25% damage from Stealth Rock. So it has 5 weaknesses and 1 quad weakness. But another really big issue is Stealth Rocks. Since it has the flying type, Stealth Rocks also does 25% damage, which is really annoying. So how did Shaymin-Sky become such a fear threat? The answer is Serene Grace plus Air Slash, and this combination is absolutely broken. Since Serene Grace doubles the chance of secondary effects activating, this makes Air Slash's 30% flinch rate become 60%. So basically, you can just spam Air Slash over and over again with your 127 base speed and get 60% flinch rate. The most broken set is Subspeed Shaymin-Sky with Substitute. Okay, that was kind of like a tongue twister, holy shit. But basically, you set up Leech Seed with Substitute, and then you can just spam Air Slash to get your flinches and HP back up. Most of the time, people are just going to end up switching out, but like on certain teams, this can just be very annoying to go against. Seed Flare also has benefits from Serene Grace. It has a 40% chance to lower the special defense by 2 stages, which becomes 80% with Serene Grace. So basically, you just get a free debuff that also does damage. So Serene Grace being able to abuse move secondary effects plus a 127 speed stat is what helps Shaymin-Sky overcome its poor weakness. Greninja is one of the most iconic Pokemon from Gen 6, and it's been an OU staple in multiple generations despite having a legitimately terrible defensive typing. Water and Dark gives it 5 different weaknesses: fighting, bug, grass, electric, and fairy, and all of these are also really extremely common attacking types. Obviously, like I said before, fighting type coverage is going to be everywhere because it hits so much different types, so everybody's going to be running it. But bug, grass, electric, and fairy are also really incredibly common types because bug hits psychic and dark types, grass hits water and ground types, electric hits water and flying types, and fairy hits dragon, dark, and fighting types. So Greninja is weak to 5 of the most common offensive types in the entire game. On top of all of these weaknesses, Greninja also has terrible bulk with 72 HP, 67 defense, and 71 special defense. So how did Greninja become one of the most dominant Pokemon in Gen 6 and Gen 7 OU? The answer is Protein, and this ability is so broken that it completely changes how Greninja is played. Protein changes Greninja's type to match the type of the move it uses before the move hits. So this means Greninja gets stabbed on literally every single move in its move pool, which is equivalent to having permanent choice specs. Greninja also has a base 122 speed, which makes it one of the fastest non-legendary Pokemon in the entire game, and with this 103 special attack and 95 attack, it can run mixed sets with physical and special moves. The most common set we see in Gen 6 and Gen 7 was Life Orb Greninja with Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, Gunk Shot, and Low Kick. With Protein, all of these moves get stabbed, which turns Greninja into an insane wall breaker. Gunk Shot destroys fairy types like Weavile, Azumarill, and Low Kick destroys steel types like Heatran and Ferrothorn, and Ice Beam obliterates dragon and ground types. Greninja was so dominant in Gen 6 OU that it eventually got banned to Ubers with the legendaries, and even after the ban, it remained a top tier threat in Gen 7. And Gen 9 Protein did end up getting nerfed, so it only activates once per switch in instead of every turn, which makes Greninja less broken, but it's still OU viable nowadays. All of these Pokemon should be unusable based on their typings alone, but they compensate with ridiculous stats, broken abilities, insane move pools, or game-changing setup moves. They prove that sometimes offensive presence and utility can completely overcome terrible defensive typings. If you guys made it to the end, comment which of these Pokemon you think has the worst typing.